Welcome to The Power Within, the podcast that uncovers the real stories and strategies behind leadership and personal growth. I'm Keith Power, and in each episode, I sit down with inspiring individuals who faced challenges, built resilience, and discovered what it takes to lead with impact. Through their journeys, we'll explore the mindsets and tools that drive meaningful success. If you're ready to grow, lead, and unlock your true potential, you're in the right place. My guest is Quinn Harwood, also known as Coach Q. Today, we explore what happens when the dream breaks and who you become as we explore more stories of resilience, growth, and the power of determination. Sometimes the dream doesn't just fall short, it gets taken away. And when that happens, you're left with one question: who am I now? Today's conversation is about adversity, identity, and what it really takes to rebuild when life doesn't go to plan. Quinn came within touching distance of the NBA, even signing with the Los Angeles Clippers before injury changed everything. But that was just the start. What followed was years of pain, setbacks, and struggle. And yet, something shifted. Because Quinn didn't just learn how to come back, he learned how to grow and how to help others do the same. Quinn, can you take us back to that moment? You're on the edge of the NBA, you've signed, and then injury hits. What did that feel like? Not just physically, but emotionally.
Keith, it was devastating. You're right at the doorstep of your dream. You're right at the marker of your goals. And you've put all this work in. And you've signed the contract. You're right there in the NBA. And boom, came down on someone's foot and blew up my ankle. It was a travesty. It was frustrating. Emotionally, it was draining, disappointing. It was a whole range of emotions. But it was a tough day.
How old were you that time?
I was 22 years old. Actually, 23.
How did you feel inside, and how did you start to recover from that?
I think as an athlete, you definitely develop a strong mindset, a push through adversity, challenges. But when you're dealt that first blow, it's a tough one to absorb. What made it more challenging was that also meant that I was not going to be on the active roster, that I would go through therapy and rehab. And so it was kind of like pushed to the back burner. So it was like two blows. One was the injury, which hurts, but one was the realization a day afterwards that their decision was to put me on injured reserve, to medical compensation, help me rehab and do therapy, and I wasn't going to be on their full roster. And so that was a different blow. And so it's like you're right on the doorstep of your dream. You've put as much as you can into it, and then kaboom. I think what happens as a person is you have choices. You have choices how to respond when adversity hits. And as a young person, you're not always quite sure how you're going to respond to adversity. Well, I was kind of pleased the way I handled it afterwards. I had already done a lot of personal growth in my professional life or personal life. And so I had some different identity strengths that were rooting me, that were able to me to get a resilient mindset and to know that it wasn't an end. It was a possibility of opportunities that can open up from this. So that took a few days, and there's definitely the emotional lag. But I think confidence comes through activity, through actions, through personal faith and beliefs. And once they become stronger, you become more resilient. So if that would have happened maybe 2 years earlier in college, I probably would have spiraled into a deep depression, Keith.
I get you. So that lag, though, that was when the dream slipped away. What broke for you? Was it the goal itself, your sense of identity, or something else?
I think what broke was the disappointment of being in a position where you're so close and you can taste it and touch it, but then it's evaporated away. And whether that's sports, whether that's a career, whether that's a relationship, I think it's a common global space in humanity we all occupy. It's like you're so close to something you want or desire or hoping for, and it's like the rug gets pulled out. It's nothing you've done or could have avoided. You just got hit with a life quake, as I call it.
So describe that feeling, though. I want to know how you felt in that lag, in that few days where you're reflecting. And as you said, you were more mature than you were 2 years before had it happened. What were you feeling? What was inside in that transitional part before you came out the other side?
It's brain fog. It's despair. It's a notion of, why did this happen? How could this happen? Could I have really done anything differently? No. Injuries happen. They're part of sports. But you kind of go through some game film, in within yourself. And once you're in that despair, discouragement, frustration, overwhelm, you have to reflect and go back to something bigger than you or stronger than you to gain some confidence, to gain some roots. And that's where I eventually landed on. It's still a journey to process grief. I mean, in essence, what we're talking about humanity-wise, when you experience loss, when you experience grief, how do you navigate that? You can deny it, you can avoid it, you can get angry. Anger is definitely emotion too that came out. Like you're mad, you're frustrated, like you want to punch a hole in the wall. I was a competitive athlete, right? And so you go through that anger zone too. And then you have to go through acceptance. And then you have to go through this process of evaluating and what's next and the next step you can take. So grief is common. It just exhibits itself in the form of a broken dream at that moment.
Interesting you use the word grief, but I heard the other day this fabulous phrase that sticks with me, that grief is the price you pay for love. So you loved something so much when it broke, it really is a grief.
Well said, Keith. Couldn't agree more with the way you just packaged that together. It is the emotion that's common to us all. We're going to deal with it in life. We're going to get hit with some loss.
Yeah, you've talked about this long list of adversities: injury, bankruptcy, we'll come to that, broken relationships. Was there a lowest point where you genuinely didn't know how you were going to get through it?
I think the lowest point was going through the broken part of an entrepreneurship, a partnership that didn't work out, kind of got burned in the process of starting an entrepreneurial business. That's why I worked in the corporate culture for years. You take that risk, you take that leap, and then you get involved with a partnership in a startup and you get burned in it. Things start moving along, but you get burned in it. This is in 2007, 2008. And in that time in America, there's a great mortgage crisis that was going on. And so you go through this uncertainty. In that also, there was a lot of relationship strain in my marriage at the time. And that was always putting different pressures on yourself. So when you evaluated that, or I was in that moment, it's a heavy burden to carry. It's a heavy load as a man, as a person, to walk through an identity pseudo evaluation crisis of, man, I'm not in a spot where I'm achieving the success I want or the financial gain I want. I'm also in this place of a, contentious, struggling relationship in the marriage. And you just got to throw your hands in the air. And you've given life your best, but you're just kind of like taking some licks. So I would say that was a very kind of low moment in my personal life story.
I feel that. And it seems to have come as a maelstrom, as a storm of things, one after the other. And yet look at you today. And we will come up to that. So looking back now, what did those years teach you that success never could?
What I really learned, Keith, is that there's personal growth gaps that we have as people. And these adversities that we go through, they really reveal growth gaps within ourselves, within our identity, within our belief system, within how we self-manage ourselves, our daily disciplines to be successful, to show up each day. And it made me gain clarity on what those growth gaps were. And then it allowed me space to go attack them. So that when adversity or challenges hit, which they hit later on in life too, we can get into that. But when they hit, you have a different source of internal strength to navigate them. They become less of absorption and they more kind of pause, pass, and then you can push forward a little faster, quicker. They lose their strength to kind of take you out or overcome you, overwhelm you. So I learned more about those growth gaps. and I learned the growth I needed as a person to get through them. And that was transformational for me. I really wouldn't change any of it at all. As painful as some of the ups and down journeys I've experienced in life, I wouldn't change them because they changed me. And at the core of us as humans, when we're changed, we're transformed, we live to our full potential. We live a bigger, bolder life. And man, that's meaningful for me.
These difficulties, when they hit, what they do, they challenge your internal alignment versus your external world. And if they're out of kilter, if you're just wearing the badge, wearing the title, whatever it is, but you're not aligned with that internally, when the pressure comes, that's when you break. So you already, even at the younger age, had some alignment. And you refer to God as your growth coach. What does that look like, though, in your day-to-day life? Not as an idea, but day-to-day touching.
For me, in my personal faith journey, it wasn't a prevalent thought in my mind growing up. But I did hit a personal transformation or a seeking. And I think that's common across humanity. There's a quest or notion of what spirituality looks like and the growth that may be attached to our spiritual growth. So for me, that happened in my early 20s. At a practical space, that kind of relationship with my faith, with God, as I would call him, that relationship takes center stage. I feel at the core of us, that's probably the one thing I do have control over in life, on how I interact with my Creator, because there's a stabilizer in that. There's a lot of things I can't control in life. I can give my best effort, I can give my best heart, I can try to overcome, but I can't control everything and the people and the stories around me. But I can really put an emphasis on that relationship. So day to day, what that looks like for me, Keith, I prioritize it, just like a wife or a kid or a business. Whatever you prioritize that's important to you, you can draw strength from. And so I'm drawing strength from that relationship in a day-to-day way. That's prayer, that's meditation. For me, in my personal journey, I would open up my Bible and read different things that would encourage me. So all that goes into how I exhibit my faith. And that may be different for other people. But I think spiritual growth, which is probably the one thing we don't touch a lot on in the coaching world, as a professional, certified coach, sometimes that's this vague area that we don't allow space for people to open up to or evaluate or connect with. And so in doing it, it's very powerful, and it has been for me.
But for someone listening who may not share that same faith perspective, what's the universal lesson in that idea of having a growth coach?
The universal lesson is that growth is a definable part of life, and that seeking growth is going to keep people from being stagnant. You have Carol Dweck did some great research on a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. And what you find where a lot of people that I coach, when they're feeling stuck or stagnant or stale or not making the progress they want, whether their spirituality is part of their journey or not, is how they need to shift into a growth mindset and the different places they can exhibit and grow. When they embrace that, things start to change and shift in their life and their story. And they become more open to different possibilities and different things that can come forward out of a growth mindset. Spirituality can be part of it. For me, it's part of my journey. But if it's not for another person, there's still a lot of growth that can come forward to reach their potential, to fulfill their goals, their dreams, their aspirations, achieve their corporate success or their entrepreneurial journey, or fulfill the mission they feel like they're called to in life.
So you've developed what you call the 6 growth zones. Can you walk us through them in a way that someone listening could start applying immediately?
The 6 growth zones is kind of like climbing a mountain of your personal professional growth. The 6 growth zones really came out of my own adversity and looking back during the year of COVID when I went through another casualty. But I look back on how I had navigated personal and professional growth. And these 6 core growth zones were key. They were my growth gaps that I identified during 20 years of my life. And the 6 growth zones really relate to 3 that are empowering to grow through life and 3 that are empowering to grow through leadership. The whole premise of Growth Time is how to be strong in life and leadership. That's a pathway to reach your potential. So as an overview, The 6 growth zones start with 3 in life. One is the power of you. The second is the power of your beliefs. And the third is the power of personal liberty. Those are the fundamental growth zones or growth gaps that we need to address as humans and people in life. And then I look towards the 3 in leadership. You got power to the people, which deals with different principles of ownership and empowerment. You've got power of performance, which is a performance model on how to build high performance teams. And then also you have the power of 2020 vision, how to lead people through vision, mission, focus, and values. How that plays out practically, if I'm someone who's listening today and I'm thinking, well, those are great concepts, but how do they apply? Well, if I'm a person who's kind of wrestling with purpose, if I'm wrestling with what my mission is or what my goals are, then the power of you helps you gain clarity on your purpose plan. What's your mission? How you plan to go about it, and why, the internal motivator, and why you want to fulfill that mission. It's a kind of a parallel. I know the Japanese way is the ikigai that we've gone through in our own personal journey, Keith, and Go Masters coaching and learning through coaching principles. But it's a way to really get identity roots and anchor roots in you as an individual and the power of you, and then how that can be expressed to get clarity on your mission and purpose so that you do live fulfilled and energized life. And then each kind of growth zone has this little nugget or takeaway of where the growth needs to happen. I know we've kind of, in our parallel universe of being connected to the coaching world, Keith, we talk about beliefs and the power of beliefs and limiting empowering beliefs. And that's a journey. Someone intentionally today could listen and go, oh, are my beliefs holding me back from the life I really want to live? Are my beliefs a restrainer to living the way I want to live? Are they holding me back in my relationships? Are they holding me back in my marriage? Are they holding me back in my financial future? So dealing with limiting beliefs and empowering beliefs is a big part about understanding our choice, truly our choice in our beliefs.
And my second guest in the first series was Geraldine, who we both know, Geraldine Gauthier, who is the Supermaster coach. And she talks at length about limiting beliefs. For those who are watching now who want to go back to that episode, it's worth looking at. And a reminder, though, that limiting beliefs are just that. It's something that we have learned to believe. It's not necessarily the truth. However, it becomes our truth unless we address that. Now, you've got a book out. I know that. And the book, I'm presuming, covers the 6 growth zones in a little more detail, right?
It does, Keith. It covers them quite extensively, and it's I think it's kind of unique. I got the inclination to write it as a coaching fable, not necessarily like, here, do X, Y, Z. It's written more in a fable format where people can identify with the story within it and the character in the story and how he's going through this transformation of himself and trying to find who he is, his identity. He's wrestling through adversity and struggles, and he's identifying these growth gaps with the help of a growth coach and an academy that's built into this kind of book. So I think it paints a different picture of visuals and storytelling that becomes really identifiable. And I think people latch on to stories. It's a common theme of human history, is that narratives and stories are more memorable than just words, theories, and practices.
That's for sure. I have a shelf full of coaching books, and I dip in and out of them, but they're not stories. So I have a book coming out in October, and it definitely has a storyline to it, multiple storylines going back to ancient Greece. I'll say no more about that because today is about you. What's the name of your book?
It's called Growth Time, a coaching fable, the clear path to unlock your best life in leadership. So it presents a clear path, what I would call for the next generation. I call it more my Zillennial fam, the combination between Zillennials and Millennials. I'm your Gen Xer. And so it's really about helping them identify a clear path, how to climb that mountain of personal and professional growth.
I, unfortunately, am the baby boomer. And I only say unfortunately because it just tells me that my runway is running out. And that's why I'm accelerating and making the most of everything that I have. But back to your book and back to the growth zones. Of those growth zones, which one do most leaders neglect? And more importantly, what's the cost of ignoring that?
The one that's mostly neglected is the power of personal liberty. So personal liberty at its core is about a freedom internally that allows us to be our best authentic self. How we self-manage ourselves to success is one of the greatest challenges humanity faces. I find that's one that's the most neglected. I think we constantly wrestle, and the term I use is with the hypocrite monster. The hypocrite monster is this kind of beast within inside of us that's innate, that we do the things we don't want to do. And the things we want to do, sometimes we don't do. And we really wrestle with this internal struggle of kind of sometimes just doing what we want and doing the right thing. And how we really self-manage ourselves to a personal freedom is a key component that people neglect. And the way I coach to it, which has been transformational for so many coaching clients, is that we're three-dimensional, and we can experience growth in our body and our soul consisting of our mind, our will, and our emotions, and spirit, and your spirituality can be defined or gain clarity how you define it. But when we are actively involved in our growth and self-managing with habits around our body, soul, and spirit, it is really a transformational journey for us all. But it's the hardest work we do. It's that internal personal work. It's the hardest work we do. But yet it casts this big shadow over our stress levels, our anxiety levels, our ability to cope, our ability to perform well day to day, our ability to do our job, but then still show up for relationships. It's so critical, but yet it's one of those areas that we have the most work to do as people.
So this cost you referred to earlier about not doing this inner work, what would be the cost of a leader ignoring that inner work?
If I'm in the workforce and I'm a laborer, or I'm a leader, I'm a corporate consultant, or I'm in the career entrepreneurial space, you're driven by the mission and the vision, the goal, achievement. The cost is you can become too self-focused and too stressed and too overwhelmed or too unaware of how you're really showing up for other people and for yourself. So what's very common, and look at the polls, the Harris poll, you see the amount of burnout that's taking place around our world and our corporate cultures of people feeling fatigued, stressed, overwhelmed, disconnected, or disengaged with their work. That's the effect of not having strength or the growth awareness of your personal liberty. There's things that you're latching onto that are creating strain and stress that you weren't really intended to hold on to and carry. So understanding how your freedom can come forward in the power of personal liberty is a high premium, but it's a high cost because it takes a lot of discipline to grow in those areas.
But the premium and the outcome from that is worth the cost.
I think it's tremendously worth the cost. I'll pay it every single day to invest in myself, and I'll encourage anyone I coach to invest in your personal growth, because that is the pathway to your fulfillment, your success, your wholeness, your ability to make more impact, to reach your full potential. It is the absolute crux of it.
One thing you mentioned earlier, and excuse me for going back to this, but you mentioned during COVID another loss, but you just skipped over it. I just wanted to ask if it's okay. What was that loss? It sounded very personal and close. So what was that loss?
I appreciate the question, Keith, and I love opens like that. You're a good coach to ask that one, to catch on to that. What I found in COVID was I would call it a casualty year for me. In 2020, the corporate career I had, I was a mid-senior level manager managing areas and territories in the corporate world. The company I worked for in the fitness industry, they went through a bankruptcy. And in that, they closed 100 of their location stores. And my market that I ran was impacted. It was closed down. So my job was eliminated. And I got this call. They put about 300 people on the phone call. And after 17 years, they said, hey, your services are no longer needed. So at the age of 44, your career, your retirement, everything you've built, all of a sudden is bankrupt and gone, so to speak. The painful journey, Keith, was I'd spent years, contending and believing and trying for a marriage that unexpectedly came for an end at the same time. So for me, with family, and I've got 3 kids, on how meaningful that whole family unit was to me, it was probably without question, the biggest source of loss and grief I've ever gone through. And so it was a culmination during that COVID where the career was pulled, an unexpected divorce, and the breakup of what you love so much was, I'm surprised I'm not crying. I'm trying to hold it together here. But it was just a painful spot, Keith. And so that was the loss. And on the flip side of that, out of that loss came forth the vision of coaching. And in that pain, a new life came. What came to end, something new came forward. And it was during that year of COVID that I had the vision for Growth Time, that I wrote the framework for the book Growth Time. I began to get into life coaching and coaching people through the journey I'd been through. And that while I'm in pain and sorrow, I'm also in this kind of toxic, glorious state of seeing a different mission and vision come forward for my life. And it was so powerful for me, and it was powerful to people I coached. So it was a weird space, Keith, to operate in.
I believe in patterns and how patterns repeat themselves. And I just noticed that your two biggest challenges came at 22 and 44. So you've got a 22-year cycle. So I'd be ready for your 66, and I'm 66 this year. And that's what I was going through my mind. And the other thing, I just last week wrote one of the chapters for my book, and it was about the phoenix. And everyone knows the story of the phoenix, burning and rising out of the ashes. But what they probably don't know is that the phoenix knows in advance that it's going to perish, but also knows with all confidence that it's going to be reborn, rebirthed. And if, rather than waiting for things to happen, you have that mind of the phoenix, I know this part of my life is going to change dramatically, and step into it and embrace it, as difficult as it is, but with a mind to the resurrection on the other side, the new you. And you've had two new yous so far, the 22 plus one and the 44 plus one. So what I'd say to you, get excited. There's another one to come and another great growth for the last lap, right?
I love that, Keith. And hearing you share about the phoenix, that was so intriguing to me. I had not known that story. What I've looked at and held on to is the story of the eagle. And so the story of the eagle, when it hits 40 years, it has to go through a metamorphosis change. It has to literally pluck its beak out, let its beak grow back again. Then it can pull all its feathers and strip in its talons again, and allow them to grow so it can live another 30 years and fly free. So the transformational metrics there are so interesting, but they're hard to go through. But it's having that vision. Like if you're listening today, have that vision of whatever you're going through, whatever pain, sorrow, or suffering. Identify those growth gaps. Have a hope that something more beautiful is coming out of your pain and sorrow, and get into action and move towards it.
I'm going to correct you on one thing there. I don't believe in hope. It's a certainty. You plan for it. You know you're going through pain, like the eagle who's losing its beak, losing its feathers, losing its talons, but it knows going through that pain, it's going to come out the other side stronger and live another 30 years. So that's a certainty. It doesn't enter into that period in hope. So I would rather, from a mindset perspective, think of the certainty of what's to come rather than a hope.
I love that, Keith.
So you've said that many people feel that no one cares about me. No one is committed to my development. Why do you think so many leaders miss that human side of performance?
Human leaders miss the side of performance about people. What I've seen is because they're so focused on their goals and their achievements and themselves. They don't have the emotional intelligence and awareness and empathy to recognize that their people are leading on what they're going through. That is the crux of where leadership begins to fail, when self gets elevated above servanthood.
For sure. And I come back to this alignment with the external, internal. Often leaders, they've just stepped up. They've become a leader and they want to do things. They want to make a difference. They want to change the world, of course. However, once you're a leader, the most important thing you do is to enable and empower your people to do that for you, for everybody. But you need to have that emotional intelligence to be able to recognize that you put self aside now. It's not about self anymore, and it is about giving, and as you say, a servant leadership mindset. So I think maybe it's our training, but we seem to be aligned on so many things here today.
Yeah.
So when you think back from your journey from chasing the MBA to coaching others, what have you discovered about your own power within?
I found that within me, there is a great mission-driven mindset. I would call my gift as being a mission-driven messenger. My motive is to drive this mission to the next generation about the power of growth time and how when you go through growth time, you could experience career acceleration, reduce stress, personal freedom, leadership skills and development. So as a mission-driven messenger, that speaks to me. And what's clear for me, and I went through this in my early 30s, Keith, and I coached many people through it, is really digging deep into your why. Like, what is your real why, your motivation? And many people, even great people I've coached or talked to and leaders, when I ask them, they're still very vague about that. And if I was to ask the people listening, what's your real deep intrinsic motivator? Well, I'm here for my family. I'm here to be meaningful, successful. There's not a clear motive. For me, when I did that growth work, and it was a growth gap in my 30s, Keith, early 30s, it was to grow and develop leaders' lives through impactful coaching, training, and education.
So you were a coach before you were a coach.
I was getting coached up myself. They say the first coach you coach is yourself. And so going through and having that anchor and that mission motivator, I reflect on that quite frequently when I'm frustrated, disappointed, things aren't going my way. The humanity of life kicks in and I go, okay, what's my real mission? Where am I getting fulfilled? And then how do I go out and grow and develop leaders' lives through impactful coaching and training education? That's how I can change the world I influence. That's how I can change it and take personal responsibility for my life to change the world I influence by fulfilling that, growing and developing leaders' lives. So that becomes the focus. And when that's your marker and that's your mission and you're walking in it and you're living in it, your confidence goes up. I mean, at the core of growth time is this message of bold confidence and how I needed it. Very filled with self-doubt, insecurity, imposter syndrome, wrestle with those for years. Understanding what bold confidence does for how you live your life, well, it really changes the scope of how you live when you have a level of bold confidence.
Now, you've lived your whole life in the US. I'd have imagined when you decided to become a coach, you'd be looking into the US, into the people there. And yet, you ended up attending a program with Go Master Coaching, as I did, based in Singapore, with Geraldine Gauthier, a French lady, leading that. What made you, not just what made you choose that, what made you not choose an American program?
Geraldine, and she was my coach too through the program. So I highly value her as a person, as a coach, and as a leader. Why I chose Go Masters was because I think the message I have is universal. It's not limited to America. Like the message of growth time to me can impact nations, different cultures, and being connected to a scope of how there's cultural biases, there's personal biases, and working in a realm of where I could understand more of cultural was valuable to me because I don't think we're exclusive. I think the message and the resource of growth time is universal to impact many nations.
I absolutely agree. We're fully aligned. I was lucky enough to be able to have that in person throughout. Yours was often done remotely, but I think we arrived at the same point together on the same journey, even though there's a few years between us. Now, we're going to come to the fun part. This is a quick fire round. Quick fire means short answers. no longer than a short sentence or one word, and go, go, go as soon as I start. Are you ready?
Let's hit the button, Keith. Let's go.
One quality every leader must protect.
Integrity.
One adversity that shaped you the most.
COVID. Loss.
Loss, right. One word that defines your own approach to coaching.
Curiosity.
And if your life were a game, what quarter are you in?
First quarter.
I love that. And what are the 3 words that describe who you are today?
Caring, committed, trustworthy.
Quinn, we could go on for ages, but I love how we've kept this sharp, succinct, wrapped up. It's very much like you and your mindset. It's all wrapped into a polished, finished article. I'm not going to go on any longer. I'm going to thank you for staying up so late in your part of the world. It's still early morning here. And I wish you well and look forward to finally meeting you in person one day, either in the US, if I'm allowed in after my social media posts, or here in Singapore or somewhere else in the world.
Thanks, Keith. I love you. I love what you're doing. You're a mission mover in my mind.
Today's conversation with Quinn is a reminder that sometimes the path we plan isn't the one we're meant to walk. That the moments that feel like failure can become the foundation for something more meaningful, because adversity doesn't just test us, it reveals us. And what you do with that, that's where your power lies. Quinn, thank you for sharing your story. And if this conversation resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Until the next time, this is The Power Within.